Hey folks, my name's Ed Travers. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm an Anglican priest serving in the beautiful parish of St. Margaret of Scotland that sits on the ancestral and on the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, Gwe. I really wanted to make sure that this week I did this video. The video I did yesterday weighed heavy on me, and I'm happy that I've done it. Today, I'm doing another video that has weighed heavy on me. See, this week, here in Halifax, we celebrated the 105th anniversary of something known as the Halifax explosion. I was fortunate enough to be a part of the service this year. I was asked to do the closing prayer, which meant that I was blessed by all the people who participated ahead of me. I heard wonderful stories. I heard heartbreaking stories. I received a blessing from a Mi'kmaq elder. It was an amazing hour. If you don't know, the Halifax explosion, it occurred here in 1917. It was it was the largest man-made, non-nuclear explosion in world history, up until the explosion that occurred in Beirut just a couple of years ago. 2 ships were passing in the harbor, and due to a series of miscommunication, the ships collided. And when they collided, they caught fire. And one of the ships that caught fire was loaded to the gills with explosives bound for Europe, bound for the First World War. The crews tried valiantly to put the fires out. I believe even the Halifax Fire Department was out there assisting. But eventually the flames made it to the explosives. And the explosion devastated the city. It obliterated neighborhoods. It obliterated communities. Rich, poor, young, old, it didn't matter. The explosion, the shock wave, the flying debris, all of that stuff. 2,000 dead, 9,000 injured. And many of those who were injured suffered injuries that they would never recover from, that would stay with them for the rest of their lives. Blindness was a major one. Now, after the explosion, almost on cue, snowstorm. A snowstorm struck. A huge blizzard. So you've got a population who've experienced a massive explosion. There's fear, there's trepidation, there's hunger, there's cold, alongside of the injuries. And then you've got a snowstorm added to that where so many people had no shelter. But immediately following that, help started arriving. Within days, help from all over the world started arriving. The city of Halifax, the province of Nova Scotia, still has an annual tradition of sending a massive Christmas tree to the people of Boston for all that they did for the city. Huge efforts all over the world got underway to help the population here. So it was interesting listening to the stories at the service, because a lot of it was, yes, it was horrible, and yes, my grandparents experienced this, or my great-grandparents experienced that, but all of it was followed with something along the lines of, the world helped us. The world provided for us. The people of the world shared with us. And this is often the case when there's a crisis, when there's a massive tragedy. The world seems to come together. The world seems to be unified in our desire to help out in that moment, when the crisis is big enough. When the tragedy grabs our heart. My thought my thought was, how do we grow? How do we grow as a society to always feel this way? That whenever there is a crisis, whenever there is a tragedy, regardless of the scope or the volume, regardless of how massive that crisis or tragedy may be, that we react in the same way. How can we as a society grow so that when 10 people in our community are living in tents, we see that as a massive crisis deserving of our attention, our focus, our commitment, and our sacrifice? How can we as a society grow to the point where we see one person hungry and we say, this is a crisis worthy of our attention and worthy of our assistance, our generosity, our charity, our effort? That's the society that we're supposed to be striving for, I believe. That's the society I think that Jesus calls us to build. Yes, Jesus tells us we're always going to have the poor, and we can talk about what that actually means. But Jesus tells us clearly to look after our neighbors, to sacrifice what we have for their sake. He tells us that it's on us to feed people and to clothe people and to lift people up. He tells us that our efforts directed towards helping our neighbors is pleasing in God's sight. He tells us that our efforts to help our neighbors is a measurement of the faith we profess. He tells us that our efforts to help our neighbors is actually good fruit that comes from our faith in God, our following of His commandments. This is a society we should be working for. Now, I'm saying this, and I know I am speaking to an incredibly generous and charitable and loving and sacrificial group. I'm not saying this because I want you to feel something negative. As a matter of fact, if I had my way, I would take the love and the kindness and the generosity that indwells in you. I would take that spirit, that spirit that longs to help out others, that is so evident in you. I'd try to find a way of giving it to the rest of the world. So thank you. From me to you, thank you for being a light in my world and showing me that this kind of love, this kind of generosity, this kind of spirit does actually exist, is actually alive and active in the world. Thank you for giving me hope that we can bring about this kind of society that takes every crisis and every tragedy, regardless of its scope, seriously. A society that when one person suffers, we all pay attention and we all roll up our sleeves to help out. Thank you for giving me that hope. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. And I pray the world is watching you. I pray the world sees your good works. I pray the world sees the love and the compassion you have for your neighbors, and I pray the world is inspired to follow you. To follow you in all those endeavors, to make life here, to make society here what it could be. Amen. Nemultus.